Hello everyone, welcome to the Yissel Missile Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and today we are continuing our deep dive series into Ed Leedskalnin and his Coral Castle. So we have already gone through several booklets of information here, as well as postcards. I guess I'll show you these now. We're just doing a quick review. Got some lenticulars that I showed in previous episodes, or different parts here. These are ones I thought were the coolest ones in the gift shop. These lenticulars show movement of the pictures here. You see how the back is. It's clear, but it's a little see-through because of all the lighting here that I'm working with. But so far in this deep dive, we have covered this book in its entirety. It's called Coral Castle by McClure and Jack Heffron. It's a decent-sized book, and we'll be using it for reference as we go on here. Also, guess I'll take these back out to show again. And this is also for new viewers here. If this is your first time watching one of these deep dives, I highly suggest you go back at the beginning and start with part 1 with us. And you'll get to see all of this stuff that I'm showing here, because I go through all of this in the deep dives prior to today. Yeah, this is all kind of one thing here. This Rockgate one. And then this was the last paper that we read through. This is by Ray N. Stoner. All of these pamphlets and materials I picked up from Coral Castle itself in their gift shop there. Now, Coral Castle is on the National Register of Historic Places. It is, I believe, ran by a private entity now, but it is protected, and it is open for tours. And like I have said in my intro video, there's no video allowed. Absolutely none. So all the photos that you see here throughout the deep dives, those are my own photos that I took on location. And we'll be having that slideshow going here as we begin The Energy Grid by Bruce Cathie. Now, this book is an updated version of 2 books by this same author. And we'll look at the introduction here. My goal is to get through chapter 1 today, but we might not. So we'll see how much time I have here, plus where we end up once we hit those markers. I don't anticipate going 2 hours today, but if we do, that's just how we do. So this book was recommended as supplemental reading to this book. These authors suggest this book, as well as a few others. And I chose to start looking at this with all of you, because we're under the impression here so far that Ed built his Rockgate, which eventually became Coral Castle, as it's known today. He built it with knowledge of what's with our energy grid around. Now, this book here, don't get confused by this. Just because this picture's on this book doesn't mean that I am on board with whatever it's presenting. We're here to look at this objectively, but this author has a Lost Science series, which is shown on the back here. And I will read all of this off, but just for reference, of having you guys look at it now. But it says Lost Science series, Ether Technology, the Anti-Gravity Handbook, the Free Energy Device Handbook, Anti-Gravity and the World Grid, Anti-Gravity and the Unified Field, and number 6 is Man-Made UFOs 1944 to 1994. Now, I'm not sure if we'll get to all of these books in these deep dives we're doing with Coral Castle, but some of these might spin off to do their own deep dives. I know this last one here, Man-Made UFOs from 1944 to 94, that one I could see falling in the Bermuda Triangle series. But our focus here today is free energy, ley lines, the Earth's grid. This is all falling in to the same topic of Coral Castle. I do believe that Ed harnessed some earth energy, and we're going to look into all the details in this book going forward. We're going to complete this book, reading this here live with all you. And I do try to make my readings feel as natural as possible, so I hope you guys could just listen to this in the background if you choose to. But I also have the slideshow that I present with all of these photographs that I took during my time at Coral Castle a little over 2 years ago. So firstly, we'll read the back of this, as we did with all the other material that we've been covering. But I wanted to point out here, you see the Easter Island head on this spine. This is a reprint, but Bruce Cathie did a whole series here that he considers all of this similar subject material. So the title of this book is The Investigation into the World Energy Grid. The Energy Grid, Harmonic 695, The Pulse of the Universe. Again, this is a combination of two prior books that Bruce Cathie put together, and it's updated with his further findings. So the back of this book reads, "This is the breakthrough book that explores the incredible potential of the energy grid and unified field all around us. Bruce Cathie's first book, Harmonic 33, was first published in 1968 when he was a commercial pilot in New Zealand. Since then, Captain Bruce Cathie has been the premier investigator into the amazing potential of the infinite energy that surrounds our planet every microsecond. Cathie investigates the harmonics of light and how the energy grid is created. In this amazing book are chapters on UFO propulsion, Nikola Tesla, unified equations, the mysterious aerials, Pythagoras and the grid, nuclear detonation and the grid, maps of the ancients, an Australian Stonehenge, and much more. Cathie's books are a must for the serious student of anti-gravity and lost science." Now it also says other books by Bruce Cathie, The Bridge to Infinity and The Harmonic Conquest of Space. And all of this is really interesting to me to look into further, so if this interests you as well, then welcome aboard. Follow along here. I don't know about, like, today in the Midwest we have, it's in the 70s today, but I've been sweating up a storm here. So I apologize for dabbing myself, but that's just how I have to operate here without having flop sweat everywhere. Okay. So this is quite a lengthy book. It's longer than the original Coral Castle we just read. It's roughly 300 pages. Page count ends at 263, but there's about 20 pages of intro, and there's more reference at the end. So the very first page of this book, the energy grid, it says, Diagram 1 showing relationship of grid structure to the geographic poles. Each of the two grids has a similar pattern, the interaction of which sets up a third resultant grid. Now this is important. The poles of the 3 grids are positioned at 3 different latitudes and longitudes, C, D, E, and F. Corner aerial positions and grid polar square. Of grid polar square, similar to aerial discovered by the survey ship Altanin. J through K equals the polar axis. So while they are using a globe model here, he has math that checks out for this globe model, but the 4 points here are where all of these grids come together. And one of them is in New Zealand, and we'll find out more as we get through this book. Yeah, this isn't wanting to focus too well. But it just says A is geographic pole, B is the grid pole, and then a bunch of formulas. So I'll just let you take a look at that. A is right here, B is right there. And I'm not going to read the math on that. But it's there for you to see. Now, this wouldn't be a complete deep dive without showing all of the other books that are in Bruce Cathie's catalog, which is on the next page. So I will show this briefly on screen here. There we go. And this is for you to take screenshots of. And I will read this out here momentarily. And yes, this is a reprint from Adventures Unlimited Press. So I tried to get as close to the first edition as I could, but Bruce went ahead and did some revisions to his other books and then combined them into this one. So we'll get to that as well, but first let's read off all of these. And these are there's a lot here. Some of these we're going to be reading on this deep dive series. But the first group of books is the Lost Science series. I'll start this slideshow here too. Give me a second. All right. So I'm going to read off all of these books, and at some point we'll get to them here. But in the meantime, this is just for reference for us to look into further later. The first group is the Lost Science series. The Anti-Gravity Handbook, edited by David Hatcher Childress. Anti-Gravity and the World Grid, edited by David Hatcher Childress. That book, Anti-Gravity and the World Grid, is going to be the next book after this one, because that was I think it was the number 1 book recommended in the other one. So we have one of the 2 most recommended books mentioned in this book. Then there's Anti-Gravity and the Unified Field, also by Childress. The Free Energy Device Handbook, edited by Childress. The Cosmic Conspiracy by Stan Deo. The Energy Grid by Bruce Cathie. That's this book right here. The Bridge to Infinity by Bruce Cathie. The Harmonic Conquest of Space by Bruce Cathie. Vimana Aircraft in Ancient India, or of Ancient India, and Atlantis, edited by David Childress. Tapping the Zero Point Energy by Moray B. King. The Fantastic Inventions of Nikola Tesla by Nikola Tesla. And Man-Made UFOs, 1944 to 1994, by Robert Vesco and David Hatcher Childress. The second group of books, the Lost City series. And this does not list any authors. Lost Cities of Atlantis, Ancient Europe and the Mediterranean. Lost Cities of North and Central America. Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of South America. Lost Cities of Ancient Lemuria and the Pacific. Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of Africa and Arabia. Lost Cities of China, Central Asia, and India. So any of you mud flood theorists out there, this is actually some pretty hard, clear-cut evidence of lost cities. And it doesn't get carried away, like I think a lot of these other channels have. And then the third group of books here is called the Mystic Traveler series. In Secret Mongolia by Henning Haslund, Haslund, from 1934. Men and Gods in Mongolia, also by Henning Haslund. In Secret Tibet by Theodore Illion, Illion, from 1937. Darkness Over Tibet by Theodore Illion, 1938. Danger My Ally by F.A. Mitchell Hedges, from 1954. Mystery Cities of the Maya by Thomas Gann, that's Gann, from 1925. And In Quest of Lost Worlds by Byron de Prorock. That's spelled Prorok, and that's from 1937. All right, so we are moving on to the next page here. And this is telling us what edition this is. Copyright 1990, 1997 by Bruce L. Cathie. All rights reserved. This edition published 1997. And it also lists more books here that we just listed already from the Lost Science series. And then there's author's note. This book is a revised combination of my second and third books, Harmonic 695, The UFO and Anti-Gravity, and The Pulse of the Universe, Harmonic 288. The contents have been updated in relation to my present knowledge. To do this, I have deleted a small amount of material which I now believe to be inaccurate, or covered in a more comprehensible form in my later works. Corrected or added material necessary to explain my theories as clearly as possible. I realize that I cannot be 100% correct at all times in my speculations, but if some progress is being made in new concepts, then I am more than satisfied. A fantastic future awaits us if we can unravel the secrets underlying the basic structure of the universe. And then we have the acknowledgments. Now, these are all, it says, for quotations from published material reproduced in the text and the illustrations in this book, I am indebted to the following. Britannica World Standard Dictionary, the New Zealand Scientific and Space Research Organization, Auckland. And then there are a bunch of publications here. I believe these are books. Behind the Flying Saucers by Frank Scully, Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston. Those are that's the publishing house. So I'll just read the books and the authors' names. The City of Revelation by John Mitchell. John Tunstall, article in The Times, London, July 1969. The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message by D. Davidson and Aldersmith. The Pyramid and Its Relationship to Biocosmic Energy by G. Patrick Flanagan. Physics Part 1 by Robert Resnick and David Halliday. Flying Saucers Have Landed by Desmond Leslie and George Adamski. The Story of the Laser by John Carroll. A Beam of Light by Gaston Burridge. The Secret of Life by G. Lakovsky. And The Changing Universe by John Pfeiffer. Continues on the next page. A New Home for America's Doomsday Radio, published in New Scientist magazine, I believe, August 16th, 1973. Blast the Bush by Len Beadall, Beadell. The Marshall Cavendish Dictionary of Medicine by Marshall Cavendish. Antarctic Base for N-testing or nuclear testing by Gilbert Sedbon. That's spelled Sedbon. That was published in the Sunday Herald in Auckland, October 7th, 1973. APRO Bulletin, March-April of 1973. The Prodigal Genius by John J. Neal. Pyramids versus the Space Age by John Tunstall. The Times, London, July 26th, 1969. Proceedings, Volume 10, 1974, Number 6 by George W. Van Tassel. And then he says here at the end, I also thank my colleague, Mr. Donald Offwood, for permission to reproduce his report on an investigation into electroculture 1972-1973. Bruce Leonard Cathie. So we have 29 chapters in this book. Some of them, they're only 5, 6 pages. Others go a little bit longer. 15 pages. 18, almost 20 for some of them. So we'll get through the preface. We'll get through definition of terms. We'll get through the introduction. I'll try my best to get through those 3 today. And if we can start chapter 1 and complete chapter 1 today, I will try to do that as well, but I don't believe we will have the time to do that. So after the chapters here, we have a list of diagrams. It's all sourced throughout the book. It gives page numbers of where to find all the diagrams. There's also tables. There's photocopies. And there's a list of maps. So let's get through the preface. I'll show you the page I'm about to read from. The universe is a living intelligence. Its heart beats thunder at the center of galaxies and whisper in the nucleus of atoms. With the spiraling waveforms of its own essence, it creates from within its infinite depths of matter, which constitutes all physical substances, living or inanimate. It was it, is it, always will be timeless. We are created by this intelligence from the same myriad of waveforms that interlace the depths of space, connecting all things. We and it are one. For all truth and wisdom, look within. For we are a shimmering mass of miniature stars and worlds, with emerald seas and sandy shores, which in their turn provide home for intelligence. Next is the definition of terms. Harmony and harmonic, etc., as defined by the Britannica World Standard Dictionary. Harmony. A state of order, agreement, or completeness in the relations of things, or of parts of a whole to each other. Harmonic. Producing, characterized by, or pertaining to harmony. And sub-definitions. Music. Pertaining to a tone whose rate of vibration is an exact multiple of a given primary tone. Mathematical. Derived from or originally suggested by the numerical relations between the vibrations of the musical harmonies or overtones of the same fundamental tone, harmonic functions. Physics. Any component of a periodic quantity, which is an integral multiple of the fundamental frequency. In this book, we discuss the fundamental harmonies of the vibrational frequencies which form the building blocks of our immediate universe, and that of the theoretical anti-universe which modern scientists have postulated as existing in mirror-like image of our own. We theorize that the whole of physical reality, which is tangible to us, is formed from the basic geometric harmonies or harmonics of the angular velocities or waveforms of light. From these basic harmonies or resonating waveforms, myriads of other waves are created which blend in sympathetic resonance, one with the other, thus forming the physical structures. Einstein stated that the geometric structure of space-time determines the physical processes. We theorize that space and time manifest from the geometric harmonies of the wave motions of light. The fundamental harmonic of light in geometric terms being an angular velocity of 144,000 minutes of arc per grid second. There being 97,200 grid seconds to one revolution of the Earth. The reciprocal harmonic of light, or 144,000th, being 694,444, repeating. It was found that to calculate the values of harmonic waveforms that have sympathetic resonance, it was possible to disregard zeros to the right or left of whole numbers and extract the values direct from the mathematical tables. Harmonic 69444 therefore refers to the geometric reciprocal of light, which in theory forms the basic building block of the anti-universe, or region of negative reality. Antimatter, a hypothetical form of matter in which all the component particles, as protons, electrons, etc., are assumed to carry charges opposite to those associated with the corresponding particles of the known universe. Antigravity. In the known universe, all physical matter has a common gravitational attraction or tendency to coalesce together. As the word itself suggests, a body under the influence of anti-gravitational fields would be repulsed or tend to move away from normal physical matter. Those are all the definitions. He has one paragraph here at the end. It has been found later in research that the harmonic of the speed of light varies in relation to the geometric distance from the center of the Earth. The value at various levels from the center to the edge of the atmosphere is demonstrated in my fourth book, The Bridge to Infinity, Harmonic 371244. And next we have the introduction, which is only 4 pages. So we'll get to that right away here. Wake up, Earth. The signals have been received. First in 1927 by American experimenters Taylor and Young from apparent distances of 2,900 to 10,000 kilometers. Hals, an engineer, reported to Carl Stormer of Oslo that echoes of 3 seconds delay had been heard at Eindhoven, Holland. On 11th October 1928, Carl Stormer, with Hals, helped by Van der Poel transmitting from Eindhoven, picked up 3-second echoes on 31.4 meters, which changed the echoes varying from 3 to 15 seconds. The signal pulses were transmitted at 20-second intervals. Echoes were received in the following delay sequence: 8, 11 to 15, 8, 13, 3, 8, 8, 8 to 12, 15, 13, 8, 8. In 2 cases, echoes were heard 4 seconds apart. The consensus was that the signals were saying, "Here I am in the orbit of your moon," and nobody wanted to listen. More than 20 years have passed since I presented the manuscript for my first book, Harmonic 33, for publication. In it, I related the findings, up to the time, of my investigations into the mystery of unidentified flying objects. Among other interesting facts, I had discovered evidence of a world energy grid system, and little did I know then that I had opened up a line of inquiry which would cause me to get attention from the intelligence agencies of several of the major countries around the world. It soon became obvious that I had discovered something that many of the world's power groups preferred to remain unknown to the general public. As time went on, it was admitted that the world grid did exist, but it was considered that it was not yet time to openly admit to a source of almost free energy. Energy means power in more ways than one. As my work has progressed, I have found more than enough evidence to convince me that the public is not being informed of the most fantastic and advanced scientific discoveries in the history of man. After 40 years of sightings, scientists and government agencies are still trying to convince the public that unidentified flying objects are figments of the imagination. I state without any doubt whatsoever that the public is being conned. UFOs do exist. They are interdimensional anti-gravity machines. I agree with his consensus there. I believe that many of the machines sighted are visiting us from outer space, but a great number of sightings are of machines produced by our own scientists on Earth. The secrets of anti-gravity and free energy production are known in top scientific circles, and they will go to any length to keep this knowledge from us. Many reasons could be given for the suppression, but I believe that one of the main ones is the financial consequences of complete release of such advanced technology on the world economy. This would certainly be a problem. Not for me. But the longer things are left the way they are, the greater the problem is going to be. Whatever the reasons are, we have the right to know the truth, and it is up to every one of us to demand that the truth be given. Every day, somewhere in the world, there are verified sightings of UFOs. While the skeptics continue to assert that such normal circumstances as marsh gas, eye floaters, the rising and setting of Venus, or the flashing of car headlights against banks of low clouds account for UFO sightings. They have nothing to say about the growing number of radar reports which indicate that physical objects, not always visible to the human eye, are continuing to frequent our airspace. Vehicles in the sky appear to watchers in the far corners of the globe. They carry out elaborate maneuvers, then fade from sight. Or they leave the area at fantastic speed, leaving bewilderment, excitement, confusion, or outright fear behind them. Within the last week, there has been an incident which has hit the headlines worldwide. The event occurred in the early morning hours of January 20th, 1988, about 40 kilometers west of Mundrabilla, near the western Australian border. Faye Knowles and her 3 sons, Patrick, 24 years old, Sean, 21 years old, and Wayne, 18 years old, watched a glowing object which resembled a giant egg in an egg cup chase a truck and a car which were traveling in the opposite direction before it turned and hovered over their own vehicle. They said it picked the car up off the ground, shook it quite violently, turned it in the opposite direction, then forced it down again with such pressure that one of the tires was blown. Crime investigators from Port Lincoln examined the car, which was covered in an ash-like substance, and sent samples from the interior and exterior to Adelaide for forensic examination. It was reported that a similar incident involved a police officer in the United States some years ago. The explanations for the occurrence have been more bizarre than the story itself. One academic said it could have been caused by a carbonaceous meteorite, quote, which could do this sort of thing, end quote. I wonder how much longer the public will accept such obvious nonsense. Hey Jason, I see you there in the chat. As long as there are inexplicable activities in the skies and on the ground, and as long as my existing theories continue to be supported by facts and reports from many parts of the world, I will not be satisfied until I am able to approach one of the vehicles closely, examine it in detail, and if possible, communicate with one of the beings who control it. The knowledge I now possess is far in advance of that which I had when I was preparing my earlier works. A great deal has happened that has tended to confirm my basic calculations and theories. Moreover, the acceptability gap is constantly narrowing. Thousands of people who have never given serious thought to UFOs are suddenly turning to all the available reference material in search for a glimmering of the truth. During my many years of research, I have uncovered a considerable body of evidence pointing to the existence of projects being carried out on a worldwide basis, which have direct connections with UFOs. From this evidence, the logical conclusion is that top scientists and electronic engineers have direct contact and communication with UFOs. I also believe it is most probable that a moon base has already been established by our own scientists. The advanced technology would give them this capability. When the rocket program was wound down years ago, it was probably because it was obsolete. See, this is where I kind of stray away from what some of these authors are writing. And really, we're here to dissect these books, not to accept everything at face value. But like I have said before, there's truth in everything. So he even mentions in here he may not be 100% correct on everything, and it's good that we have an author here that is willing to accept fallibilities here. As I continued making my discoveries, 7 o'clock. All right, we're going to go an extra hour from here. And I hope that we can get through that first chapter. But, all right, let's continue here. As I continued making my discoveries, the existence of a vast power grid, the devices contrived to establish communication between some groups on this planet and the UFOs, I made a point of keeping interested parties in government aware of them, fully expecting to be either dismissed as a crank or at least to be told to stop my activities. Much to my surprise, I was given every encouragement to continue with my probing and to publish whatever information came to light. Possibly this is the first time that any government has ever authorized a civilian to pursue unrestricted research into UFO phenomena. You have to question why. That's my thought. I'm adding to that right there. Among other things, I have discovered a series of harmonic geometric equations which, when put into practical application, will cause reactions in space-time. During the 1968 series of nuclear explosion tests by the French at McClure Island in the Pacific, it was requested by the head of a government department that I provide a list of pre-calculated explosion dates. In my earlier publications, I had indicated how geometric factors determined any possibilities of a nuclear explosion or reaction. I supplied the dates as requested, and later on, I was informed that my calculations had been passed on from Auckland to the heads of 4 other government departments before the actual tests were carried out. My calculations proved correct. This information is now in the files of the government authorities concerned. If they are not already aware, then events of this order must sooner or later command the attention of international scientific organizations. One day the scientists will no longer be able to turn their backs on the basic precepts of true science. They will have to examine all evidence impartially before they reach their conclusions, and instead of offering only ridicule, carry out a full worldwide investigation into all the phenomena related to UFOs and the world grid energy system. Facts cannot be ignored forever, although it is obvious to all thinking people that there are interests that would very much prefer the world to be kept in ignorance and in cultivated indifference for as long as possible. My investigations have led me into many byways, not all of them a great moment or interest to others than myself. The workload of my studies has increased enormously, and yet there are facts as well as hypotheses which I feel must be brought to the notice of the public urgently. Some of the information will be found in the following pages of this updated book. And with that, we have cleared the introduction. And next, we have chapter 1, and it is 14 pages, I believe. We can either keep this to an hour, or we can double it up and try to get through this. But I really don't want to speed through all this. Yeah, it's a little less than 4, I'd say like 13 pages. And the diagrams make it about 12. We'll see how far we get. I'll try to get through this entire chapter, but if we have to break it into parts, that's what we'll do. So chapter 1 is titled The Branching Areas for Investigation. So keep in mind again, this edition was published in 1997, and it is a revision of his previous books. So, all right, let's begin. What is happening to the classical ideas of scientific research? It has always been my understanding that the basic attitude towards any scientific investigation should be one of non-bias. The scientist, I understood, was a person who collected all available data on the subject of his study, weighed it and interpreted it, and reached certain conclusions about it without prejudice and without preconceived notions. Today, science is up on a pedestal. A new god has appeared. His high priests conduct the rituals with nuclear reactors, moon-probing rocket ships, cathode tubes, and laser beams. And their territory is sacrosanct. Laymen are denied entry. A letter to an Auckland newspaper signed by Robert Adams, chairman of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers of the USA, New Zealand section, referring to the proposed installation of an Omega station, states with supreme satisfaction, quote, "It is not for laymen to pass comment on such installations," unquote. As more advanced nations lead the way into a state of technocracy, it becomes more and more apparent that the laymen of the world will have no more say in this planet's affairs than did the slaves of Pharaoh. Already there are clear indications that the scientific establishment in a number of countries is able to operate and to conduct activities with government funds without having to account scrupulously to government or citizenry just what those activities are. There is an open and manifest activity in certain directions, but there is reason to suspect that this often cloaks an inner secret activity, an activity in which government and people have no say. Already scientists speak among themselves in a language that is no longer public property. Have they, despairing of the muddled state of the world's affairs, banded together in a modern-day monastic order of their own, with the aim of taking over entirely the affairs of the earth? There is an enormously vast mass of data that has never been explained satisfactorily, ranging through every branch of every recognized science. The indefatigable Charles Fort, that's a new word for everyone here, Indefatigable. Charles Fort referred to this body of data as the, quote, damned, end quote. Damned by science because it did not fit in anywhere. And so in order to preserve the status quo of the scientific establishment, had to be rejected and ignored. So straight away we're learning that there's information in this book that's not accepted by modern science because it doesn't fit in with all their other bullshit. Pardon my French. Alright, UFOs are in the category of the damned. Never before has public interest been so high in flying saucers, strange aerial lights and objects, reported landings, unidentified submarine objects, alien voices speaking no known earthly language on low-frequency radio bands, unexplained explosions which coincide very often with sightings of UFOs, and a host of related phenomenon. There is no existing science capable of neatly fitting in all this data and offering a consistent explanation. To acknowledge what millions of laymen around the world already know, that UFOs do exist, would result in a complete upset of the scientific establishment. The facts are all there, staring blind science in the face. But the facts are unacceptable. Therefore, UFOs don't exist. There is nothing new in this attitude. The only new thing is that the establishment itself has changed. In medieval times, establishment meant the ruling families of Europe in the West. The knowledge then being built up and explored by people known as, quote, witches, unquote, and, quote, alchemists, unquote, was contrary to accepted theories about reality. The penalty for these seekers of truth was frequently a lingering death. Today, science is on the throne, but nothing else has changed. Uncomfortable data are still rejected and filed away somewhere, at best as, quote, curiosities, unquote. In examining his data with a clear, unbiased attitude, the true researcher must correctly reject all those which are clearly not free of doubtful accuracy. But after all his sifting, if even one datum remains that cannot be ignored, it is obviously his duty to come to grips with it. UFOs are notoriously nothing more than, quote, hallucinations, end quote. But even if we allow for all the unvetting or otherwise human errors of observation, there is still the implacable, scientific, and impersonal evidence of radar to be accounted for. Radar is not subject to hallucinations. It records the presence of solid objects, establishes their movement patterns, tracks their flight. Auckland's radar station at Manjeri is only one such station of thousands throughout the world which is habitually recording the presence in the sky of unidentified moving objects, moving too fast to be explained as birds or aircraft, and moving in flight patterns impossible for any kind of Earth-made craft. There have been many occasions when radar control has directed incoming aircraft to areas nearby where objects are, quote, seen, end quote, by radar. Frequently, the pilots have been unable to detect anything visible. While they search for the object, the radar follows the search. The unseen object's, quote, blip, unquote, is watched on the radar viewing screen. It plays leapfrog with the searching aircraft, bobs up and down like a yo-yo, or veers away and moves off at a fantastic speed. Inexplicable, yes, by our present understanding. But does evidence of this kind also have to be rejected, ignored, tucked away for future reference? It would appear so. In January 1969, the University of Colorado issued a report on UFO investigation endorsed by a panel of, quote, leading scientists, end quote, convened by the National Academy of Sciences. Quote, our general conclusion, end quote, according to the bulky report, quote, is that nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years that has added to scientific knowledge, end quote. This is, of course, double talk. It does not deny the existence of UFOs outright, but merely publicly admits that science has failed to come to grips with the worldwide phenomena. The panel of scientists noted that the report concedes a residue of, quote, perplexing episodes, end quote. At England's Lakenheath Air Base, used by both the USAF and the RAF in 1956, radar operators on the ground detected, quote, one or more, end quote, targets moving apparently at speeds as great as 2,000 or 4,000 miles per hour, although there were no sonic booms. They made right-angled turns at a, quote, few hundred miles an hour, unquote, an impossible maneuver for terrestrial craft. 2 RAF fighters were sent out, and one obtained radar gun lock on the target, but the object, whatever it was, circled the fighter's tail and remained there in spite of all evasion attempts. The plane eventually had to land in order to refuel, and the ground staff saw, quote, one or more white, rapidly moving objects. This is but one example of the inexplicable residue which flatly refuses to be categorized or classified into some convenient pigeonhole of knowledge. There were 59 cases cited by the report as being of, quote, special interest from several hundred, end quote, that were reviewed. Mr. William Ryan, a Democrat from New York, the congressman in Washington who is also the voice of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, or NICAP, which has about 10,000 members in some 40 countries, told the House of Representatives, quote, a federal UFO surveillance program should be set up. UFOs cannot be wished away, and reported sightings will persist, end quote. I don't like to say that I agree with him. And NICAP added a bombshell of its own. It claimed to have proof that the Colorado investigation team had never intended to study UFOs objectively, but had intentionally fitted its data into a negative report. Reading of this, I was inevitably reminded of a document in my possession. It is a copy of a directive to USAF investigators of UFO reports. It is signed by General Curtis LeMay, who was at the time of its publication chief of the USAF. In effect, it instructs investigating officers of UFO reports how to denigrate UFO reports, how to play them down, and how to offer logical explanations for various phenomena. It does not suggest that UFO sightings are to be considered worthy of a fuller study. I wonder, can scientists really be as hollow as they appear to be? Do they really imagine the much despised laymen of the world will settle for shrugged shoulders and a shroud of marsh gas? I wonder, couldn't it be that the scientists already have the full explanation of UFOs, and for some reason not yet clear, are deliberately keeping the knowledge as a jealously guarded secret within their own closed ranks? Jealously guarded secret. Yeah. Incredible as it may seem, this appears to be the truth. I have amassed a considerable amount of evidence which strongly suggests that scientists in a number of countries not only know a great deal about UFOs, they also know how to keep contact with them. I believe that from such contacts there has already been a considerable exchange of information. I believe that the establishment has gone through a phase of shock amounting to severe trauma as new knowledge has been revealed, and that there is not one science, not one major industry that can remain unaffected by what the scientists have already learned. The rocket programs of the Soviet Union and the United States, the transportation systems of the world, the power supply authorities, and every conceivable kind of industry would be rendered obsolete if a new, unexpected, yet universally available system of power were to become available. I believe the Earth is on the brink of having access to that power source. I am neither a naive fantasy fan nor a give me a second here. So I haven't read some of these words in quite a while, and it takes a while to also remember how to pronounce them. Proselitzer. Proselytizer. Nor a proselitzer of any particular brand of faith. I am in complete accord with the French authors Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier, in that I declare it is not necessary to believe everything. It is only necessary to look at everything, to study and to examine everything, to explore with an unbiased mind, free of bigotry, to sift evidence and known facts, and upon these to reach certain tentative conclusions which are not the product of preconceived notions. I hope that at least a large number of readers will feel the same way. And I do. I do feel that way. The road towards an equation began with the discovery that there exists on this globe an all-encompassing grid, the interlocking lines of which correspond to the lines of flight-verified UFO appearances. It would be in order here to recapitulate briefly the theories and calculations regarding the nature of that grid. First of all, a geometric pattern of UFO activity was discovered, which indicated a definite purpose in the presence of UFOs about our planetary surface. Having established the pattern of the grid, the next step was to break it down into mathematical coordinates. When this was done, it was found that all the values represented in the grid had direct harmonic relationships with the speed of light, gravity, and Earth mass. Once these relationships became clear, it was possible to theorize on the method of propulsion employed by the UFOs. It would appear that by setting up a harmonic imbalance of gravitational forces, the UFOs are able to reposition themselves in space-time. That is, the UFO moves from one point to another in order to restore the balance of the forces caused by space-time geometrics. I hope the full meaning of this concept will become completely clear as we proceed. So I'll reread that paragraph right here, because I believe this is important for us to understand. Once these relationships became clear, it was possible to theorize on the method of propulsion employed by the UFOs. It would appear that by setting up a harmonic imbalance of gravitational forces, the UFOs are able to reposition themselves in space-time. That is, the UFOs move from one point to another in order to restore the balance of the forces caused by the space-time geometrics. The thinking up to this point followed rationally from the theories of Einstein, which state in part that geometric relationships of space and time control all physical processes. My findings led me to conclude further that volcanic activity, atomic disruption, nuclear bomb detonations, and earthquakes could all be related to the grid structure, an atomic bomb being a space-time geometric device, and volcanoes and earthquakes occurring on geometric points of the grid system due to disturbances at those points. A correlation of all these different phenomena had led me to conclude that all major changes of physical state anywhere in the world are brought about by the harmonic interactions of those manifestations which we refer to as light, gravity, mass, and electrical and magnetic forces. The controlled manipulation of these resonant factors would, in my hypothesis, make it possible to move mass from one point to another in space-time. That is, to the eye of a theoretical observer instantaneously, or to change the form of mass to a more or to a less tangible state. The contradiction or expansion of time could also be controlled by the same manipulation of harmonic pulsations, or resonances, since time has a direct relationship with the speed of light. The, quote, speed of light, unquote, as we call it, is not a constant, contrary to all the declarations of scientific establishment. In theory, for this is yet to be demonstrably proven, there is no limit to the speed of light. And I believe now we understand that the speed of light is limited, and it can only go so fast. In 2025, that's where we're at an understanding of here now. Like, we figured out the miles per hour, or light years. It's all out there to look at, but we're not focused on that today. The concept of relativity has been with us for a long time. It reached its clearest expression at the hands of Albert Einstein. Now, a study of UFOs can show us some of the practical applications of the theory. It is commonly believed that Einstein expressly declared that the speed of light was an absolute and that nothing could exist beyond this speed. Biologist Ivan T. Sanderson states in a recent book titled Uninvited Visitors from 1968 that shortly before his death, Einstein denied that he ever made any such statement. Quote, what he did say was that around 186,000 miles per second, mass would become infinite, that your backside would become your front side, and time, as we conceive it, would come to a stop. In other words, there is no reason, theoretical or otherwise, why that particular speed cannot be exceeded. Sounds about right. End quote. That was end quote. I said myself. My opinion is that sounds about right. There is also a widely held belief, possibly one that has been deliberately encouraged, that Einstein's work on his, quote, unified field theory, end quote, had not reached its final stage when his death left his work to be completed, presumably by still other brilliant minds yet to develop. But Sanderson asserts that Dr. B. Russell has privately stated that Einstein completed his theory before his death. There is evidence to suggest that Dr. Russell might be correct. In 1945, secret experiments were carried out in the mid-Pacific by American scientists. A unified force field was created, and a ship of the U.S. Navy fully crewed was made to disappear. Ivan Sanderson and others have brought forward further detailed evidence in their own books. I believe they're talking about the Philadelphia experiment there. But that doesn't sound right. So we're going to have to write this down. Ivan Sanderson. I hope you're all hanging in there. We're on page 6 of 14 for chapter 1 here. We should be able to finish this today. Alright, continuing on. Over the past few months, I have found evidence which strongly suggests that the unified field concept has been incorporated in the UFO grid system in a harmonic sense by doubling the C or light values in the harmonic unified field equation based on the famous Einstein equation, E equals mc squared. A gravitational effect becomes possible. But I will leave the full explanation of this to another place. In Harmonic 33, it was my endeavor to establish that the harmonic equivalents of light, gravity, and mass, and so on, are built into the global UFO grid system as geometric or angular units, and expressed as minute of arc values. Some of these values are as follows. Speed of light harmonic, 1439. Anti-speed of light harmonic, 695. Harmonics associated with the Earth's magnetic field, 2545.5 and 3930. Earth mass harmonic, 1703. Logarithmic and radian values as well as trigonometrical for values were found to be harmonically tuned with geometric pattern of the system. Tuned to the geometric pattern of the system. At that time, my calculations were taken only to 4-figure accuracy, chiefly because this enabled me to carry out my calculations more easily. My log tables only run to 4 figures in any case, and it would have taken many months of additional work to find all the correlations if I had to work with, say, 7 or 8 figure harmonics. So he's talking about harmonics in the millions to 10 of millions, numerically. But in recent months, thanks to the receipt of much new information coming to me, I shall explain later, I did extend my harmonics to 5 figures. I then found a harmonic unified field equation. The main lattice type pattern of the grid I had found consisted of areas of 30 minutes of arc oriented approximately north-south, and that's at 006 degrees true, and 30 minutes of arc approximately east-west, or 276 degrees true. Subsequently, it has been my discovery that these areas are further divisible into 16 smaller areas measuring 7.5 by 7.5 minutes of arc. Note: for all practical purposes of orientation of the system, for all practical purposes, the orientation of the system has been stated as 006 degrees true, according to the accuracy of the plotted grid on my original maps. Recent computer work allows the possibility that the actual orientation could be 5.90165 degrees. The harmonic reciprocal of this value is 0.169444. This would create a direct harmonic relationship with mass as discovered in later research. So are they giving numbers that would make levitation possible? I think that's what we're getting at here. Matching up harmonics here. Recent radar and verified visual sightings of UFOs, plus a large volume of evidence coming to light in the New Zealand area alone, have verified the existence of the grid in the pattern. I have described it beyond any shadow of reasonable doubt. Furthermore, the creation of a complex network of manned radio stations within the structure of the UFO grid system proves not only that the system is there, but also that our technical experts have a knowledge of it, an understanding of it, and through it, direct communication with the UFOs themselves. Incredible? In the framework of conventional thinking and in the light of concepts which we have been conditioned to accept as the cornerstones of what we euphemistically call reality, my statements may indeed seem beyond belief. I do not intend to allow my incredible statements to remain hovering in midair, as it were. In this book, I shall be presenting a variety of evidence, facts, and hypotheses. I hope to answer at least some of the more important questions that must arise, and I hope to point the way in which other investigators, perhaps infinitely more competent than myself, may travel in the search for truth. Meanwhile, I must, at this stage, offer some evidence to the doubtful that the grid really does exist. I am satisfied that there is an overwhelming body of evidence that provides all the proof necessary, and that establishes that the harmonic radiations emanating from it are in turn causing certain physical effects at specific localities. Moreover, the activities of scientists in certain key areas indicate that there is feverish, government or otherwise backed activity going on in connection with research into the basic structure and character of the grid. In my grid system, drawn up on a map of New Zealand, was completed in 1965. As verified sighting reports came to hand, I plotted on this map the precise positions of the sightings, and not to my surprise, found that invariably the UFO positions fell with uncanny precision on the grid's lines of longitude or latitude, never in the intervening spaces. In September 1967, reports came of 4 accurate fixes of UFO sightings, a few minutes apart in the Hawke's Bay area, map 1, which we're going to show the picture of this here momentarily. Here were no isolated sightings, but 4, all within a short period of time and in a relatively small area. When I plotted the position of these 4 verified sightings on the grid map, I found they fell exactly on 4 parallel lines of grid latitude. One was over the city of Napier, one to the northwest, one to the northeast, and one to the southeast. As I told an Auckland reporter at the time, the Hawke's Bay sightings provide the most impressive evidence to date in support of my grid theory. End quote. The UFO, or UFOs incidentally, were seen on September 3rd, 1967 by residents of Hastings, Pakowai, Waiora, and the Esk Valley. So I wonder if that's that's all 4 locations. Hastings, Pakowai, Wairoa, and the Esk Valley. I'll show you the spellings of those in a moment here. Did I somehow employ ESP when I constructed the grid map 3 years earlier, predicting as it were by means of lines on a map just where future sightings would be made? And then here we have the map. It says a portion of the grid superimposed on the Hawke's Bay area where UFO sightings were reported. The 4 sightings, ringed, coincide perfectly with the lines of the grid which had been drawn up 3 years previously on the basis of confirmed sightings throughout New Zealand. So let's show this map that Bruce drew up 3 years prior to the sightings hitting the map. We have here his map, Hawke Bay. The circles with the dots are where the sightings happened, and the grid is what he drew several years earlier. And they all fell on the map. We are told by the scientists that theoretically there should be a region of negative matter in the universe. Okay. This would constitute a negative reality that would consist of matter made up of antiprotons, anti-electrons, and anti-neurons, etc. If any particle of matter from a negative reality were to drift into and come into contact with a particle in our positive reality, there would be instant annihilation of both particles. A cosmic atomic explosion. This all sounds very well and would create some sort of symmetry in the universe, but they never explain where the boundary is between the two regions. Space is not empty, as most people imagine. There are all sorts of particles drifting around in space which could light the fuse of such system. If this were so, I believe the universe would be a very dangerous place to live in. My fundamental theory concerning the formation of particles of matter and antimatter is as follows. First, matter and antimatter are formed by the same wave motions in space. The waves travel through space in a spiraling motion and alternately pass through positive and negative stages. Matter is formed through the positive stage or pulse, and the antimatter during the negative pulse. An electron is formed by 3 spiraling wave motions in space. These waves pass through each other at 90 degrees. The point of intersection in space causes the manifestation of what we term electrons. The electron thus formed carries out a spiraling motion. Each spiral of 360 degrees forms a single pulse. The circular motion of an electron about the nucleus of an atom is therefore an illusion. The relative motion of the nucleus and electrons through space give the illusion of circular motion. The period during the formation of antimatter is completely undetectable, since obviously all physical matter is manifesting at the same pulse rate, including any instruments or detectors used to probe atomic structures. The period or frequency rate between each pulse of physical matter creates the measurement of which we call time, as well as the speed of light at the particular position in space of which we are aware at any given moment. See diagram 1. And we shall do so. Hey Norma, good to see you. We're getting close to the end of this chapter here, but there is a lot of information, so it is worth rewatching if you need to. Diagram 1. This is showing the pulsation of when... This is basically showing when matter is created, there's positive and negative cycles happening. But that the positive and negatives can't touch each other or else they will destroy each other. In the form of what looks like a nuclear explosion. So that's just what he was touching upon there. And the caption below this says, formation of matter and antimatter in alternate positive and negative cycles. The frequency rate between each pulse of physical matter determines the rate of flow of time and the speed of light at any particular point in space. The path of the nucleus through space would also be a spiral, but for the sake of simplicity, it has been shown as a straight line in this diagram. So basically, this center portion here would also be spiraling, but it's so small of a spiral, he's drawing it as a straight line. Note, recent research has indicated that the electron could possibly move through 371.27665 degrees. This being the radius multiplied by 3.24, which I call spiral pi. The harmonic of 371.27665 would be a reciprocal value of that derived from the unified equations, 26934 approximately. If the frequency rate of positive and negative pulses is either increased or decreased, then time and the speed of light vary in direct proportion. This concept would explain time as a geometric as Einstein theorized it to be. A rough analogy of physical existence can be made by reference to a strip of motion picture film. Each frame or static picture on the film strip may be likened to a single pulse of physical existence. Now this is something I can follow along with. The division between one frame and the next represents a pulse of antimatter. When viewed as a complete strip, each frame would be seen as a static picture, and in a sense, by comparing two of these static pictures, say one at either end of the strip, then the past and the future can be viewed simultaneously. However, when the film is fed through the projector, we obtain the illusion of motion and the passage of time. The divisions between the static pictures are not detected by our senses because of the frequency or speed of each projection on the movie screen. And I believe like after 16 frames a second, your mind just starts blurring everything together. But 60 frames a second looks really unsettling. I watched that first Hobbit movie. Not the Lord of the Rings, the one that came after those. I watched that in 60 frames per second in the theater, and it made the CGI look terrible. And everything else looked sped up. So there is like a point with film projection where it gets out of hand. And 120 frames a second, you'd only be shooting that if you were intending to slow down the film for slow motion shots. Because really, like, even the 60 frames per second, it's too much. It's not worth it. And 24 frames per second is the one standard where our eyes really don't see the difference between each frame. And digital video has gone up to 29.99997 or something like that. And the general number is 30 frames a second for digital today. All right, let's get back to this. I thought this was cool. This is a good representation of time, by comparing it to a film strip here, and the anti-gravity being the spaces in between each frame. However, when the film is fed through the projector, we obtain the illusion of motion and the passage of time. The divisions between the static pictures are not detected by our senses because of the frequency or speed of each projection on the movie screen. But by speeding up or slowing down the projector, we can alter the apparent time rate of the actions shown by the film. To continue this analogy, our consciousness is the projector. The conscious, quote, I am, end quote, part of our individuality passes from one pulse of physical matter to the next within the framework of the physical structure, which we term our body, thus giving the illusion of constant reality and the passing of time. It is logical to assume that we have a twin stream of consciousness on the antimatter side of the cycle, which in fact creates a mirror image of our own individual personality. This postulate has already been put forward by scientists. Are we talking about like an antimatter version of ourselves? Like, I haven't even considered this stuff until now here. Hey, Brenda, good to see you in the chat. I see you're on your personal account too. Good job. Good to see you all here. Yeah, so just to catch you all up here, we're talking about negative matter, antimatter, and how there should be a negative version of us existing in the interdimensional plane. That's where we're at today in this reading. In other words, if the frequency of pulse manifestation is altered, even fractionally, our awareness of reality in the physical sense will shift from one spatial point to another. In fact, we would travel from one point in space to another without being aware that we had traversed distance in the physical sense. This would be space travel in the truest sense. Let's look at another analogy. We can consider a simple spiral spring as representing the wave motion of an electron through space. Every second, 360-degree spiral of the spring. All right, so I guess they're saying every other complete circle spiral of the spring represents the path of the electron in physical matter, while the opposite applies to antimatter. The theory outlined above explains why light has been described as being caused by both wave motion and a pulse. Both explanations are correct. A pulse of light is manifested when the energy level of the atomic structure is altered by outside influences. Theory of Max Planck, PLA-NCK. In the physical plane, the electron of the atomic structure appears to jump from its orbit. According to my belief, the electron does not jump orbit. But this is the illusion we obtain, since we are not equipped to perceive the path of the electron during the antimatter cycle. What actually happens is that the radius of the spiraling motion is increased or decreased in order to absorb or release the energy imparted to or removed from the atomic structure. If the energy is imparted, then the electron must extend orbit in order to maintain balance in the system, and vice versa. Light or any other radiant energy above or below light frequency is therefore manifested by undetectable changes in the radius of the spiral motion of the electron during the antimatter cycle. If this hypothesis is correct, movement from one point in space to another point, regardless of apparent distance. In other words, true space travel is completely feasible by manipulating the frequency rate of the matter-antimatter cycle. The time and speed of light can be varied in direct proportion to any desired value. This, I believe, is the method of propulsion used by UFOs. and it is at the core of the theory upon which I have constructed the global UFO grid system. So again, we'll read this paragraph here. By manipulating the frequency rate of the matter-antimatter cycle, so slowing it up or speeding it, or slowing it down or speeding it up, the time and speed of light can be varied in direct proportion to any desired value. And then this is how the UFOs propel themselves. This is the basis. I am aware that considerable refinement will have to be undertaken, but I believe that the completed concept will be quite simple. As our technocracy advances, you will find from a casual examination of many examples, printed circuits for example, that equipment and apparatus become simplified rather than more complex. And now, to round off this section of my mathematical theories, a word or two about the equation, which I believe will set up a reaction in space-time. And that is his equation right there. The classical Einstein equation is contained in this, but the speed of light factor C has been doubled. So I'll show it again here for you. Yeah, I can't read this math. I'm sorry. So the second equation is equal to m, or the volume of mass, or the volume or mass of any unit body in space. So this second equation here, I'm not even going to try to verbally say what that is, because I know I'm going to butcher it. By calculation of the diameter of any spherical mass and the rate of its rotation, the value of the speed of light, time, and gravity accelerations should be capable of being determined. If the volume of irregular bodies can be determined, then by calculation of the equivalent spherical volume, the other values can also be determined. There is a corollary, or correlation, basically. The linear speed of light in any particular point in space determines the volume of the body precipitated at that point. Therefore, relative to Earth values of light, a lesser speed will determine smaller masses, and larger speeds will determine larger masses, such as that of Jupiter, for example. The angular acceleration of light will remain constant. Corollary. For any unit body, one precipitated, then the rate of rotation or spin and its volume will directly determine its rate of acceleration in space, i.e., its movement in space relative to other bodies. This movement will maintain a constant balance of the angular acceleration of light at the point in space in which the body may be at any given instant. If these theories seem to be complex and abstruse, bear with us. They are presented here as a means of establishing the foundation of other theories in support of which evidence will be offered. And that concludes Chapter 1 of the Energy Grid Harmonic 695, The Pulse of the Universe by Bruce L. Cathie. Man, that's a bunch of information. I didn't think we'd get this deep into this series, and here we are. Now, I didn't doubt myself, obviously, but I didn't think we'd be going in this direction here. But I'm excited. I love it. gonna check the chat here to see how you guys are doing. Awesome. All right, so we have finished chapter 1 for this week. Next week we will be starting chapter 2 on this book. It is Mathematics of the World Grid. I despise looking at math. I'm sorry to say. I never took calculus. I never took trigonometry. So I'm one of those people. Like I need to learn visually, or I need to hear people speak. I just need that type of engagement with this stuff. But I never looked into calculus. I never looked into all of this mathematical formulas because really, I mean, a lot of what we're looking at is based on the fact that this is a marble and not something else. But generally, this seems to be like the math checks out. There's the whole grid map right there. There's 4 corners on this thing. But like, if we were to open it up and stretch it out, I wonder what that would look like. And maybe we'll play around with that later on as we get through all this. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today. And next week we'll have about 17 pages to get through. It shouldn't go longer than today. It should actually be a little shorter for next week. But again, it's going to be called Mathematics of the World Grid. There's a few more sightings here and plot points and grids. And this is all covering mostly New Zealand, since that's where Bruce Cathie was studying all of this stuff. Page markers in there. There, we got through that much today. So I read a whole bunch of book titles at the beginning of this. Like the first half hour is just me going through all the introduction and all of the resources used, all the different book titles. So that's all loaded at the beginning of this deep dive, this part 12 here. If you want to look into those books ahead of time before I get to them here, feel free to do so. It will be quite a while, because there's all these books on this page, and there's even more on the next one. There's all of these acknowledgments. There's all books and articles here, which I read off all of the titles at the beginning of this stream. But there's a lot of information here. So he's pulling from a lot of information, and he also combined 2 of his previous books and revised them to make this book. So it's this is just loaded with information here, and it's just gonna keep getting more and more interesting to me. And I hope all of you too. But this is gonna be pretty incredible. By the time we're done with this, we're going to know more than most people on this topic. You think about day-to-day, everyone doing their stuff. How many people are talking about free energy? And how many people are talking about Tesla without Elon Musk's name in their mouth? Not too many. But we'll be talking about it here. And again, this is the book. If you want to pick it up and read along with me, or make your own notes, or just if you're curious. And again, this was recommended in the Coral Castle book we read from at the beginning of this series. But you can see they use the Easter Island giant heads for the illustration of this series. So it all falls into play. We have Coral Castle that is compared to Easter Island statues and the pyramids of Giza, along with Stonehenge. They're all lumped in the same category. All four of those things. But we will be covering the energy grid now with this. We're going to be trying to find answers to what Ed did here. You see this? How he scraped everything out. The question is how he lifted it all, and it wasn't from ropes and pulleys. I'm sorry to say. Even this larger one that you see behind these red flowers, like that larger, that's the largest stone that came from, what was it, Florida City? That he had transported over here to this new location in Homestead. So we're really just trying to figure out what Ed was working with here. Beyond all the different types of rock, he used 2 different types of coral rock. But like, look at these. You see all the. Just look at the detail on this stuff. Well, already went past a little bit, but he was able to go in here and do all of this on his own. Nobody saw him do any of this. People tried to watch him. They couldn't find a time when he was actually working on it. Some of them stayed all night just waiting to see if they'd spot him doing any work, and saw nothing. So it continues to be a mystery, but I think by the end of this next few weeks of reading from the energy grid, hopefully it doesn't go until like the end of summer. I want to try to get through this book so that we can move on to other topics within Coral Castle here, other authors, and see what their contributions to this area of research is, and then we come to our own conclusions here. Norma, you ask, Steve, do you have any idea how this or how these were moved? I'm under the impression from what we've read so far and from everything that I've learned previously that Ed used sound, and like he was documented as singing to some of the stones. So I think a combination of sound and just magnetic, like he used the magnetics that are running underneath the land that he was using, which I guess Florida City had some remnants of it, but I think he moved to Homestead, which was a few miles south of Florida City. He moved to that new location where this is where I'm standing in this picture on screen next to his cardboard cutout. This new location in Homestead had higher detections of the grid, like right under Homestead. So he moved his castle over to this location, and he had giant truck beds move some of these, like the pillar and the Polaris stone. That's the one that we see with the hole at the top, and we see a bird perched on it in some of these pictures here. Yeah, so I think a combination of sound frequency and magnetics, along with whatever special properties some of the stone may have had and still has to this day. A combination of all of those things, I think, is what is happening here. And Ed has said that it was very easy for him to do. And I'm sure he had his version that he told the public versus how he actually did it, so that he could keep a sense of mystery to it, so that he could have a source of income of people showing up to want to tour his property here. Yeah, I forget the it says the name of the type of rock. We went over it in here. It was called something. Yeah, of course. Yeah, right. It was called something. Listen to me here. But yeah, there's a name for the rock. I can't recall it off the top of my head. But there were two different variations. Like the one in Florida City was different from the one in Homestead, but they were very similar. And then there's also the possibility that he just made quickcrete, like put all this stuff together and molded it real fast, like it was liquid, and then he made it solid. I don't know. I don't really support that theory, but places like Pumapunku and uh, these other ancient cities where there's like megalithic structures and everything, especially in Egypt with the Great Pyramid, those all have giant like footprints. You can't move these things by any conventional means, but can they be molded and sculpted? Possibly. There's scoop marks on some of these. Like there's this one location that has an unfinished pillar that's in. It is in granite, and it's unfinished, so it's like in a quarry, but like there's scoop marks inside of it. Like someone just went with a device and just carved out of this stone, and it may have. We're talking about technology we have no idea about today. Like we are all unaware of it. But I would say it would have to have something to do with frequency, sound, and light. And I guess the best way I could describe it is these, and Michael Tellinger explained this in regards to Ed, that it may have been holding two different objects, and by either humming or singing would create a resonance that would also make a force field, so to speak, like a laser that can cut stone as well as lift stone. This is all hypothetical, though. This is me saying my own understanding of what's going on. More so, I think it would be the lifting of the stones, but it would be in connection with him singing to them or humming and giving a sound frequency to it, rendering the weight of the object to zero. Yeah, Brenda, there's some people saying that he might have been some sort of extraterrestrial, but I think that's getting a little away from the reality of all of this. He may have had contact with other entities. We have no idea, but did talk about um, basically like the underworld, like everything that we have here. There's like an opposite version of us, as well as like an opposite version of like my back, like everything here that you see here. There's an opposite version in another parallel dimension, a negative version of it. And Bruce Cathie even says consciousness has a negative opposite version of it that we're unaware of. And that if those two things, if the negative and positive, if those atoms ever touched, then both would explode like a nuclear bomb. So, I mean, it's a lot of information for me to just contemplate here. But I'll leave you all with that for today. And enjoy the rest of your week. I do have other deep dives coming up this week. But next week, Tuesday, we will be doing Chapter 2. And we will go from there. And I'll have to sit down and actually... The plan was going through these photos if the book didn't show up today. But I do want to talk with each of these photos here with all of you. So at some point I'll do this as well for a stream. But you've seen so many times, because I've had this slideshow going up for each show. But I can get back into showing these individually again in full screen. Like, I could show it full screen, and then I can make myself tiny like this, and then you guys can see this entire image in full detail. Like, this is essentially what I'd do. For an upcoming deep dive, I'll just talk like this and go over these and pause them as we talk about them. But, like I said, that's for another day. So, I appreciate y'all being here. We kept this within 2 hours, and I am now going to go take care of other things here. I got some hunting to do. So, until the next one, take care of yourselves. I have Thursday's show in Bermuda Triangle. I have Saturday's show on the Chicago film industry. I have Sunday's general chill show. Let's talk about it. And eventually, we'll be doing the Friday show of the Great Lakes Triangle. So, I'm getting all those things done, prepped. We'll be starting Gravity Hills, which will be a deep dive series into how there's these hills all around the world where you could set a car that's on an incline going up a road and put it in neutral, and the car continues going up the hill. So that's going to be a deep dive series on this channel. And I don't know where that's going to go, because there's multiple locations, and the thing that led me onto it was a place in Pennsylvania. So we'll look at the Pennsylvania location first with that series, and then we'll expand into the other places around the world where there's also gravity hills. And then, as I said before, there's the U.S. financial system deep dive series that I'll be doing. And we're going to start right off the bat with End the Fed by Ron Paul. So we'll read that, and it's a really good read. I've read through most of that book already. I never finished like the last 20 pages or so. But we'll read through the entire thing here on this channel. So we'll cover the fiat system, why it's no good, and what we can do to replace it or just do away with it completely. Go back to bartering. I don't know. But we're going to cover the Federal Reserve. We're going to cover how fiat money came into existence here in the U.S. and around the world, and what it's done to us. I also have a book called Debt the First 5,000 Years. Can talk about currency going back to ancient civilizations. That's what I want to cover in another deep dive series as well. And then that's going to pack up my whole week. We get the Bermuda Triangle Thursdays, Great Lakes Triangle on Fridays, Chicago film industry Saturdays, Let's Talk Sundays. I guess Gravity Hills would be Mondays. Coral Castle will be Tuesdays. And the monetary system stuff will be on Wednesdays. Unless I just move. I can swap around the Mondays, Wednesdays things once I iron it all out. But then that'll be 7 shows a week. 1 show each day of the week. Every week. And I hope to follow through with that for all of you. Because I do like doing this. Alright. Until the next one. Class dismissed.